think about 5 blue badges or FTEs for Microsoft. There's a lot of people in the world that want to get into technologies that don't have any in-person event or any in-person opportunity. We are under the illusion that we have privacy. We think we have privacy. We don't have privacy.
Yeah, for anyone who's younger than 25, well, they will think you and I were dinosaurs.
What's going on in Ukraine is reprehensible. It's shocking.
What we're not talking about, we need to talk about in Power Platform.
Hello, my name is Vlad Sarov, and this is the Sarov Plus channel. My guest today is Mark Smith. Mark is well known in the dynamics world. He has spent many years mentoring, educating, and expanding the Power Platform community. You know Mark as the host of the NZ365 podcast and YouTube channel. He has been an MVP since 2012, but what is even more impressive, his program, 90 Days Mentoring Challenge, produced more than 30 new MVPs. Wow! Can you believe it? This is an achievement on its own. In this interview, we will talk about switching to IT without technical skills. Mark will share his story about traveling, mentorship, his home country, New Zealand, and how he has got started. Enjoy.
Hey, Mark. Nice to see you after a while. You and I, we have had our last conversation, face-to-face when? 2 years ago? Right before COVID, I think.
Yeah. When I left London in, the November, I think, before COVID, maybe the October before COVID. So yeah, that would have been the last time I saw you in real life.
Yeah.
In London, right?
And I think you moved in, it was like perfect timing. Yeah, moving to New Zealand just before that. Yesterday I was watching some YouTube channel about a lady, she's traveling with caravan in UK and in New Zealand. And she told it was the only country who could have a proper big gig, like thousands of people.
Yeah.
It was like the only gig probably in the world. So you've been in the right place, perfect time. So it's well done. So we're coming off the heels of Microsoft Envision. So what's your takeaway? What do you think?
Well, I think the big thing that they're obviously wanting to land in FY23 is the all-in-one contact center or contact center platform. So I think that's a big opportunity. It'll be something I'm going to invest heavily in, time-wise, learning, etc., in the next 12 months. And I think the other big highlight was the active monthly users on the Power Platform. I think 20 million was the announcement number, and then about a week or so later, when Satya did his earnings call, that had gone up to 25 million active monthly users. So
wow.
It's pretty amazing how fast the Power Platform is growing, and the opportunities that it's creating for people, all over the world to learn how to create Power Apps, Power Automate, portals, all sorts of opportunities are now available.
Yeah, it would be unfair not to mention, and we'll have, as usual we have an introduction of Mark. So you mentioned you're traveling, and actually for community, and since it's going to be done in Ukrainian language and Russian languages, I know you've been traveled through the Trans-Siberian Railway. And what I know about that, my dad was building it when he was in Soviet Army, one of many builders there. Yeah, so I know his stories, and a lot of our viewers, they pretty much heard about those stories. So what's your perception? So a person who was born and raised in New Zealand, warm country, completely different kind of environment. So how was it for you?
So, my wife and I, we flew to Beijing in China, and then we took a connecting flight from Beijing to Vladivostok. And the reason is everybody that when we were doing our research, everybody seemed to start the Trans-Siberian in Moscow and travel through to Vladivostok and fly out. And the thing is as you go across Russia, it goes from very opulent to extremely poor. People still living in like houses that are literally just made up of whatever materials that they could find around. And so we wanted to go the other way. We wanted to go into Vladivostok, experience Vladivostok, and then go across. And of course, everybody told us that we were crazy. Everyone said, it's dangerous, you've got to be crazy going there.
Was it summer or winter? Was it summer?
It was spring.
Spring. Okay. So it's actually pretty much winter over there.
Yeah. And in spring, of course, everything's dead. There's nothing growing because winter's just finished and now everything's just mud, and I'm not saying everything, but a lot of it was in what we saw. But anyhow, Vladivostok was an amazing experience. It was like going back in time to a degree, because I felt like there were these amazing buildings that had been built, but then nobody had maintained them. So they're falling down or they're half built or things like that. And you could always see the remnants of war everywhere. Even Vladivostok, there was, the gun emplacements there. It was because it was a border city to the Pacific, Japan, being off that coast, etc. But it was an amazing experience. It was extremely cold. The Trans-Siberian, people said, you're crazy. Nobody speaks English.
No,
that's only Russian. And so, we quickly learned our, maybe 10 Russian words.
Yeah, that's was the funny thing in UK with train. We have a massive museum over here in York where you have a train museum. And what I learned, you actually, you used to have first, second, and third class. And all my life, all my childhood, I didn't know that first class exists. It was all trains had second and third, never first.
Yeah.
So we had SV, like SV, and those are, it's really, really rare you can meet any wagons. The guys who are watching it, you already know who is Mark, but I think it's worth telling that how much mentorship was for you, how big it was for you. And I know you probably, did you mentor hundreds of people? Is it fair to say?
Are you talking about the 90-day mentoring challenge?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so the 90-day mentoring challenge, I think I've done just shy of 1,000 people through that over 5 years. And so, that's been a phenomenal experience. And I started that while I was in London, when I kicked that off. And it's been amazing. I think last count, 36 MVPs had now are MVPs that went through that program in the biz app space. I think about 5 blue badges or FTEs for Microsoft have gone into Microsoft. So it's been great to have a part in assisting people in their careers and really getting a direction on how you can go from being a Power Platform developer and having really no experience in that space to actually growing a full career. And, I feel it takes only 3 to 6 months and somebody can really turn their life or change directions from a career perspective. And
it's, we need to mention that 1,000 people, though, this is the people you actually talked one-to-one, at least once.
Yeah.
So it wasn't some kind of training, asynchronous, impersonal. No, it was face-to-face, almost like maybe Zoom.
So it was virtual face-to-face because I actually, before COVID, one of my reasons for starting the program is that I saw that all mentoring that people were doing was always in person. And although that's very effective, the problem is there's a lot of people in the world that want to get into technologies that don't have any in-person event or any in-person opportunity. And so I think last count, over 40 different countries, people from different countries have gone through the 90-day mentoring challenge. And the beauty of what I did back there was because I made it virtual and it opened it up to people from, for a period, I was running a Northern Hemisphere version and the Southern Hemisphere version. And that was just to give the biggest opportunity or the widest audience group that could attend and get mentoring and get a pathway forward without having to know somebody personally in doing it. And so, the format that I would run with is that in the early days, I would interview people before they came into the program and just get a background, understand them, explain what it was. And then I did 6 major modules, about 1 hour each, that I would go deep dive into everything from communication skills to how do you engage with Microsoft to how do you learn the tech skills, certification paths to how to become an MVP to, what are the roles that you can take in the industry. So anything from, functional consultants, developers, through to project managers, change managers. There's so many, what about if you want to start your own company in the space? I've kind of done it all across my 19 years I've been in business, Microsoft business applications, and 30 years I've spent in the Microsoft ecosystem working generally for partners as well as working for Microsoft. And so what I wanted to do is distill all that knowledge into a 90-day course, and then allow for, everybody bring their cameras on, and we'd do Q&A and all that type of stuff.
Wow.
As part of that experience. Yeah.
And I think the numbers talk for themselves. You mentioned a few dozen MVPs just out of those 1,000. I don't think.
Yeah. So about 35 last count. Maybe it's closer to 40 now become MVPs that have gone through the.
I'm sure probably you could call it fast track into MVP, because others take years and years to get there. So
yeah. I just try to kind of get the questions out there that everybody has, and get the answers, and get a plan in place for people so that they can take proactive steps to go from wherever they are to wherever they want to go, type thing.
Tell us the thing many of us never been to is your own country. Tell us about New Zealand. In New Zealand, the only thing a lot of people know, that's the country where they shot that Hobbit movie and a couple of those.
The Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, and it's marvelous, the best probably kind of landscape you can see. But how does it feel to be an indigenous almost person?
Yeah, New Zealand is an amazing country, and but the thing is that it is, totally surrounded by water. The closest next country is Australia, which is a 3 to 4 hour flight away. And the thing is, it's at the very bottom of the world, right? It's the furthest city from Europe. Invercargill is the furthest city from Europe. And so it is very remote. And what a lot of Kiwis do when they finish their university, they leave and go to Europe. And particularly they go to the UK. And so, my wife's a little younger than me, about 18 years. And so she had finished university and she wanted to go travel. And so that was part of, what led us to go and spend 18 months traveling and stuff and experiencing Europe. Now, New Zealand is amazing. It has everything in it. It has mountains covered in snow, and then it has amazing beaches where you can surf, and it kind of like everything in between. We have an area that's called, that a road goes through called Desert Road. It's kind of desolate in the middle of the country, and it's because it's altitude that makes it a desert. Nothing grows because it's cold. And so we have kind of everything. We have the best, seafood available to us. We have great produce, and we farm great meat, very dairy and sheep centric. We do a lot of export of that and milk to other parts of the world. But there is a lot here. And what I loved after traveling the world and everything was that we live in the closest town to where I live right now is 40 minutes away. So I look out over the Pacific Ocean on a little bit of land, and I'm getting to build it up and be, my wife came up with this name. We're creating what's called high-tech hippies.
Okay.
So we both work for tech companies, right? We're very much into tech, but we're living an almost off-grid lifestyle. The only thing that I'm not off-grid with right now is power. Otherwise, everything else is off-grid. My internet all comes wirelessly, so I'm not connected. I store all my own water from rain.
Wow.
All my wastewater is processed on the property and then fertilizes all my plants around the property. I'm growing, fruit trees. I'm growing big vegetable garden. I'm basically building. One day, when the economics is right, I will go full solar power, and then I'll be 100% off grid. So, but the crazy thing is, my entire home, everything, I've got over 100 IPs just in my property. I've got full Wi-Fi across it. I've got over 100 different IoT devices in my property. I can sit here and I can send a command, and my front gate closes. I can turn lights on anywhere in the property. I can turn on my my hydroponic system in my greenhouse. I control everything via my voice. And so, yeah, very, very set up.
I remember Mark Zuckerberg, that's a Facebook guy. He was talking, he was trying to build it on his platform. And since we have all the technical people who's watching us, they would love to learn what kind of technology. I'm sure we can tell it's Microsoft, right? It's Azure. Everything is Azure.
No.
Oh, it's IBM. IBM. No.
I tried Azure for ages to do my personal stuff like websites and stuff like that. But it's, there's other better ways. And now I tend to I use more SaaS related solutions rather than me building it on Azure. So, my voice assistant I use for everything is Google Home. And that's because my wife works at Google, right? So I've got probably 10 different Google Home devices around the property.
So probably have additional level of privacy, I guess, no?
Yeah. Privacy is, tell you, living in China, when we traveled in China, you realize very quickly the idea of privacy is just not something that's considered, right? Okay. There's no privacy. And I feel that Chinese people have understood that for ages. There's no such thing as privacy. Everybody, the government's always watching. What I found is that in the Western world, we are under the illusion that we have privacy. We think we have privacy. We don't have privacy.
No.
If you're connected to the internet, you don't have privacy.
No, exactly.
And I think it's a different mindset that you need to have. You can have the illusion that you're going to create your own level of privacy. And, my network here is quite robust and my firewalls, etc. I can tell every time I try to get hacked, which is quite frequently. And
which IP is coming from usually?
It's interesting. It's often coming from Europe.
Oh, wow.
European, like Portugal. I've had a lot lately coming in from Portugal. Yeah, crazy, eh?
My environment's usually coming Chinese IPs, so it's I had to look even the entire region. Yeah, interesting.
I've had very little from China, but it's mainly, as I say, recently Portugal, and that's because I'm on Starlink. And I found that when I first had Starlink, and I was getting a lot. So I've got dual WANs, and I was finding I was getting a lot coming in. Like obviously, people are trolling the domain pool or the IP pool of Starlink and trying to, get through that. Now, I don't use Starlink's, any of their, outside of their dish, I don't use their router or anything. I use my own proprietary routers.
But your internet is Starlink, right? So your internet is Starlink.
So we're on Starlink right now.
So perfect. So what kind of speed do you get?
About 300 down and about 20 up, 20 to 30 perfect. Up.
So in UK, I think we have Starlink today, but I was one of the very few initial people who subscribed. I hadn't offered that thing, but I had our BT giving me 1 gigabyte, so I had to switch to a different speed. So comparing New Zealand to UK, so you've been to so many different places. I know you spent quite a long time in UK. So what you can tell us comparing these two countries?
The difference between UK and New Zealand, I love the UK in that there's just so many people and it's so easy to connect with people. So living in London where I was, it was amazing. I was able to get involved in the community. In fact, while I was in the UK, I was booked to fly to Ukraine because Andrei Batenko had set up an event there and the Ukraine wouldn't give me a visa. Come in.
You see, I think, and that would be completely different. So can you tell us how you began? So what was your beginning in the Dynamics? I don't think you had any mentorship program you could follow when you started.
No, so 19 years ago, I was working for a company in IT, and I had been working in the medical industry at the time that the internet was kind of coming out. And it excited me, right? This whole internet thing. My very first computer that I purchased, I was a groundskeeper at the time. So I was mowing lawns for a school. And I went out and bought a Tandy. It was called a Tandy computer back then. And, it came with everything installed, and I quickly broke it and got really good at running DOS and then running Windows back then. So I was, I really enjoyed it. Back then it was on bulletin boards, and you had a board modem that made all this cheeping sound. But that was my first computer. The crazy thing is that first computer of mine cost $6,000.
Wow.
And that would have been, well, what, 30 years ago. So that was crazy.
Was it Apple? Was it Apple or was it PC?
No, it was called a Tandy PC.
Tandy,
So
okay.
Tandy was an American brand. It was quite popular back then. And, you know, that was kind of my start. Now, when I was working for this medical company and I built their website, and I was like, I need to learn how to do web design. So I looked up and I found this course for this company that was delivering it. And I was like, I went and did this course, and they had this kind of club membership that you could do as many courses as you wanted if you paid an annual fee. You'd have to go and attend them. So I got halfway through that, and then I applied for a job to work at that company, and I got it. And there was still, you know, the extent of web design back then was to learn a product called Microsoft Front Page, which was, you know, and, you know, there was nothing about learning HTML or CSS or anything like that. And so I joined the company. I then found a course in America that was a 5-day course on teaching web design, properly web design. So it was HTML, it was CSS, it was learning how, you know, it was even on the cusp of what was called ASP pages back then. And so I was employed as a salesperson to sell the training. So the first class, our rooms took 12 students at a time. I sold all 12 seats. And then I went and did the training remotely into America. And I actually was the trainer for those first 12 students. So I not only sold them on it, but I trained it.
Did you sell remotely?
No. So that was in person, And so I did my training. They had a train the trainer session, which I did remotely in the middle of the night to do that. But then a couple of weeks later, I turned around and delivered that live, that class. And so, and of course, so that was my first experience of doing, you know, training as in delivering training. And so it took off from there. I then got into things like an area called internet working, which is a 5-day course on Linux, and really right down to how a packet's created on the network and how they go up through what's called the OSIRM, you know, and how they ultimately travel to the point that they're reassembled and are visible on your screen. And like, so I taught those type of classes, and I ended up in that company becoming the general manager of that company.
Wow.
And while I was there, one of the contracts that we secured was to deliver Sun Microsystems training. So these were, you know, Sun Microsystems was an amazing software and also platform, but of course doesn't exist anymore. It went into receivership. You know, that was the origins of where Java came from. And
for anyone who's younger than for anyone who's younger than 25, well, they will think you and I were dinosaurs. Probably we mentioned that they will never, they never heard about it. And it was perfect. We need to mention that somehow, you know, they say sometimes life goes in loops and circles. So now you start with a PC-based computer, and now you work for an IBM. Massive
isn't
company.
It crazy? I didn't even. The thing is, the company that I was working for, the founder of that company is called Eagle Technologies. The founder was an ex-IBMer. He's no longer, you know, he doesn't no longer walks the earth, but he so that's crazy how the loop of life, because I was there, and this would have been in 2003, and we had a Fox Pro database.
Wow.
That was our CRM system.
Wow.
Right. And so that was no mouse interaction. It was all keyboard shortcuts and things like that. And so what happened is I did a market scan. What were the CRM systems in market? And so, you know, everything from Goldmine to Maximizer. There was a couple others I can't even remember now. And Microsoft had just released, it was called MS CRM 1.0, and that was in the start of 2003. And so that's the product I was investigating. By the time I implemented it, it was CRM called 1.2, which came out in November of the same year. They released, and being 1.2, you can see it was kind of like a patch version of the product. And so that was my start. And the crazy thing is, I literally fell in love with the technology. what it could do, what sold me on it was a separation of business logic to the data layer. And that, and back then, software is only updated every 3 years. And the beauty of what Microsoft's sales pitch was then is that any customizations that you made, anything that you did to make it run the way your business needed to run, would be forward gradable. So when Microsoft released a new release, your customizations were separated out in a diff file and could be applied over the new system. That sold me on it. Nobody else was doing that kind of thing in the market at that time. There was no such thing as cloud. Cloud wasn't a thing. So we had to install, multiple servers, because you had to have a front-end server, a back-end server. You had to have your mail server as a separate, your data SQL was on another box. So that was kind of like the start of things. And I have not left it. I really focused on that key technology area, CRM back then. I built my own company out of it in New Zealand, sold that, moved to Australia, built the largest dynamics practice in CRM in Australia. It was 2 times larger than our closest competitor.
You want to mention the company name because a lot of people might know that name.
The company doesn't exist anymore. It got acquired and bought out. But at that time, the company that I was involved in was doing about 800 million a year.
Wow.
And it wasn't just Dynamics, by the way. It was other consulting area. But we built a business that was doing around 25 million just in CRM, nothing else, just Dynamics CRM in Australia. So it was quite good, great. It was great. But then I decided to, leave that for a while and travel the world. And of course, I traveled, all over the world, which has opened up, if you like, the career opportunities and the people I've worked with.
That's natural. I wanted to say, I still remember in days of 1.0, 1.2, that's when I started dealing with dynamic CRM those days. I still remember how we had every single day conversation, how many boxes do we need to acquire? Is it a single SQL box? Is it multiple? Those conversations you cannot even imagine today. It's completely
totally irrelevant, right?
Totally irrelevant. But in those days it was a big game, right? So was it for you the same? Did you feel admin people who knew what they're doing with system administration, they were big shots?
Totally.
Since we switch gears talking about Ukraine, and obviously that's a big topic now, and obviously we can. I think today one of the key tests, your attitude towards what's going on is how you call it, and we definitely call it a war. And we're not calling it any different name. So what happened, and your insight would be valuable for people who are now desperately want to get into IT. So before we had, that's actually in Russian language sounds, and Ukrainian language sounds even funky, VT. It actually sounds like 2 words, 2 sounds, but actually they mean 2 different things, and they mean how to get into IT. So it's almost like language helping you with that kind of idea. And before it was a popular idea, but while we could see people from other, university graduates, people, business analysts, bankers, they're trying to switch into IT. Now we see people, older generation, people who are 40 plus, 50 plus trying to get to IT. And you and I were big fans of Power Platform. We're big, I think, not just fans. We believe that everyone needs to join. What do you think? Why do you think Power Platform is a good starting point? We had this conversation with you, but I want people to hear firsthand. Yeah.
Well, first of all, what's going on in Ukraine is reprehensible. It's shocking. I just can't get over what's going on there, and that it's allowed to go on in a modern world that we live in. That's what blows my mind, that this is possible. And I've actually cried a lot about when I see, because I follow a lot of people that are tweeting from Ukraine, and probably my Twitter feed now is just about as much around Ukraine as it is around around business apps. And so I, like, every day I've got up and I've seen, what has gone on, what areas have been invaded, etc. And it shocks me. And it shocks me also because I see images of people in Russia that have living their life normally, like nothing is happening, like no war is going on.
Exactly.
And that I find very difficult, and I find it hard to understand And then I also appreciate being on the other side of the world and not that on my back doorstep, so very hard. But when we switch to the subject of then switching into IT, and I know that millions of people have been displaced, from Ukraine to other countries.
Today I was reading it's like 6.6 million just in Ukraine. So
wow.
Just in Ukraine displaced, yeah.
Yeah. So if you take a look at those, right, all those people they need to make money, right? They don't want to, what I've noticed of the people that I have met from Ukraine, they have a sense of pride in who they are, and they don't just want to have handouts. They don't want to just live on the generosity of somebody else, but really want to make their own way. And so I think there's an opportune time, to move from a whatever skill set you have into a model of developing an IT skill set, a marketable skill set in IT that is usable anywhere in the world. And, I had when I say I had no education, I never went to university. I never, went past a high school or, so I went to school till I was 16 years old. That was it. And then, but it didn't stop me getting into IT. And also then I spoke with a lady recently, and she was in her 50s in the UK working, and she heard about the Power Platform. She attended my 90-day mentoring challenge. And she decided to quit her job and spend 6 weeks learning everything she could around 4 to 6 weeks, everything she could around the Power Platform and how to create Power Apps. Now, when I started my career, it was very hard to get training. You had to pay thousands of dollars to get training on Dynamics back in those days, the predecessor to where we are with the Power Platform. Now with Microsoft Learn, you have all the training available, and it's on demand, and there's no cost. Anybody can access it anywhere in the world. And so, the opportunity, this lady, she studied, she sat 2 or 3 exams, and she was like, you know what, at the end of it, if I can't get a job, I could always go and work at McDonald's, or I could go work somewhere and do, service-based work.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give it a crack. Well, she got employed at the end of it, right? She landed her job because she had showed, look, I built this app, I've done the, and so she was over 50, and she did that. Now she's actually an MVP. How's that, right? She's now an MVP.
So from low skill opportunities, definitely move to high skill opportunities. And how long did it took her?
So it took about all up from not being in the BizApps community to being an MVP took her about 2 years.
Oh, wow. That's a long story. But so before she got first employment.
So 6 weeks she spent studying, training, sitting the basic certifications for the Power Platform. And this is the beauty, right? Is that like I've just taken grads out of university, and it took me about 4 weeks to get them, about maybe 6 weeks to go from never hearing of the Power Platform ever to being certified architects.
Yeah.
Right, which is the Power the PL 600 exam.
Yeah.
And so I know that if you can commit the time, and you can get the developer license, which costs you nothing, get your demo environment set up, because you need to actually have an environment to practice what you're learning. Otherwise, it's just theory, and theory by itself is not enough. You need practice. And people go to me, but what project do I work on? How do I get the practical skills? You find a project that you want to create for yourself. You find something in your life. So I would put the challenge out there. You've got 2 weeks to automate using Power Automate something that you do regularly every week in your life, but I want you to automate it for yourself. So it's going to save you time. Let's say it takes you 20 minutes. And now if you can reduce that 20 minutes to 30 seconds because of some automation you're running, I want to see that. RPA, robotic process automation, is installed on Windows 11 by default as part of Power Automate. Use that. Automate something in your life. Make your life easier and do it practically for you. Now, then when you go for a job and they go, what have you done? You can go, can I show you? Can I show you what I've done? Here's some automations I've done. Here's an example why ideas are everywhere. Right here, this is my seed collection of all the different type of seeds. I got about 5,000 seeds sitting here. And the problem is with these seeds is that there's different times of the year that they have to be sown in. There's different temperatures that they need. They have to go through what's called a stratification process. So if you're wanting to grow a maple tree, you have to, for about 4 months, put it in like freezing conditions. Yeah. And then you have to warm it up. Other seeds require freezing, warm, freezing over a 12-month period. There's no app for that, right? No. There's no app. And so guess what? I can then take that idea and I can create my own power app that's going to solve that for me. It allows me to catalog all of those, what the stratification, what time of the year I should be planting them, how I need to treat them. I could create myself an app that did that. Now, everybody has in their life things that they could think of that they could create an app for. You might be involved in a social activity, that you could create an app for. It could be a book reading club, it could be sports.
Or volunteering. Volunteering is very popular today, any kind of volunteering, especially in Ukraine. And I want to pick up that topic of project. I remember in my days when I had a web design agency back many years in my country, and we were hiring web designers, and none of them had any experience. The only guy, the best guy who actually, now he's a creative art director in a major ad agency. He came with a huge portfolio, and it was his first job ever. So he built whatever he liked. He just built websites for himself, and you could choose like dozens of them. I think that's a brilliant point. You don't need to be employed to get your experience. And you mentioned RPA. We have a couple of videos you can watch about RPA and actually building Power Platform. The thing I want to highlight, you were saying, so that lady, 50 plus, she spent 6 weeks from zero to hero. Was it 6 weeks when she got her first employment in Power Platform? Yeah. And then in 2 years, And then in 2 years from then she's an MVP because she's giving back to the community. And at the end of the day, MVP is all about giving back to the community, creating content valued for others to learn. And the beauty is on YouTube now, there are, I don't know, at least 50 great YouTubers that are creating amazing learning content for the Power Platform. And so there's so much content out there that there's no reason that it's all free. Yeah. You've just got to go and set, what is your plan? What are you going to do a week? Are you going to spend an hour? Are you going to spend 30 minutes? If you're looking after little kitties and stuff, it's going to be hard to balance that because they're going to take your time. But the thing is that it's about, carving out some time because you're really sowing into your future. And then, what the pandemic has done is that it's made people consider employing people that can be anywhere in the world. I right now, the company I work for, I actually report into Australia. So a whole different country I report into. I don't actually work for in the New Zealand market as such. I work in the Australian market. And I have seen, so many people now in the business application community that work in other countries, as in remotely. They don't travel to those countries, they work remotely. And the beauty of the Power Platform and what we can do and what we can build is that we can work remotely. Heaps of the people that work on projects that I'm involved in are located in China, are located in India, are located in the Philippines, all remote to me. But I'll probably never physically see them in the physical world, but they're all working remotely on these projects. So what I have found is that, in working for IBM in my case, pre-pandemic, they would never have employed me remotely because the company just didn't think that way. Companies didn't think of, people could work remotely. What the pandemic has done, particularly in IT, is people have gone, you know what? We can employ people from anywhere in the world. This is literally a global marketplace. If people have the skills, they can create amazing value. Who cares where they live? Exactly.
So it's really changed what's possible, in the world. And I mean, heck, I do a lot of work for another company that is based in Seattle. And, and once again, it's been 2 years since I've traveled to Seattle, yet I have done hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work for that company. And I'm on the other side of the world.
Exactly. And the beauty of it, even if you don't know where you're going to be tomorrow, it is not affecting your employment. Well, let's mention the size of opportunity, and I'll ask the question, which probably next big question after the people ask your name, is how much you make. So I'm not going to ask you how much you make, but let's tell people, the people who are going to join, what kind of salaries they can expect being hired in Australia, in UK, remotely, US, as, let's say, function consultant, like basic starting position.
So like when we hire grads, they start at $70,000 a grad.
New Zealand dollars.
No, Australian dollars.
Australian dollars. Okay. So it's roughly, is it $50,000, $60,000 US?
Oh, I'm not sure on the
I think
conversion.
it's close to that. Yeah.
So that's a grad. That's somebody with no experience whatsoever. And we'll pay that for 2 years while they're in our grad program and grow from there. A typical architect nowadays are getting about $180,000 Australian. So that's an architect. So I always say an architect's got 5 years experience, 5 to 7 years experience. And I'm even seeing, if you're, got more experience than that, going up around the $210,000 to $225,000 mark. From a salary perspective. And I'm talking pretty much Australian dollars here. Yeah. And so, and then, if you have longer careers in the space, it can creep up, $100,000 or so more $1,000 than those levels. And so, that's kind of the spectrum. And, there's good opportunity. There's good. Last time I looked on LinkedIn and I searched for Power App jobs, there were 22,000 openings around the world for Power App jobs. And when I searched for Dynamics 365 jobs, there was about 23,000 jobs for that were open around the world.
So we're talking about the opportunity, remote work, the size opportunity. Another thing we need to tell people, Charles Lamanna was giving numbers like 2-3 years ago that he was thinking that they need 2 to 3 million more Power App customizers, obviously not developers. But that's people who can build something for a end user or for a partner.
So I think Gartner came out with a number that 500 million apps needed to be developed by 2025. And there's obviously not enough developers in the world to create that many apps. Hence what drove Microsoft to build the low-code platform and make it easier for a wider definition of the word developer, right? Customizer, configurer, somebody that can, as I say, if you're awesome in Excel, you could develop easily into building apps. So, when I see 25 million active users that Microsoft are talking about that are currently on, Microsoft are well on this. We're at the start of a massive growth curve. So if you invest in your career at this point, this is a kind of 15 to 20 year payback. For the investment that you make now, you will be in demand for the next 10 to 15 years. And the only reason I say that time frame, because we assume that new technology will come out and move us forward more advanced in that time frame. So it's well worth the investment. There's a massive global shortage. I was just reading on Reddit this morning that there, somebody had done a horticulture degree or something like that. And they were saying, and this was in New Zealand, they couldn't make more than $70,000 a year. And they had a 90,000 student debt and things like this. And all the comments were, get into IT, get into IT, get into IT, because IT is where the money is. And it's not going to dry up anytime soon. There's so much opportunity in that space, and there's so many different paths, as I've been saying, that you can do in IT.
And I think when you and I were starting, it wasn't that concrete that IT will be a big game, and we still risk, and it wasn't a bad investment. So even if you're watching us and you're 40, 50 plus, you still have an opportunity. And what we need to highlight about Power Platform, first of all, it's cloud-based. when people switch to IT, they think of what kind of alternatives I have. I can go be a QA, quality assurance.
Mm-hmm.
I can try to learn development, and that's probably not the best path for people who never had done any development from scratch. It's achievable, but maybe not the first start. So it's almost like they think QA, too competitive, easy to start. Development, not so competitive, actually high demand, but so hard. Learning curve is substantial. And I see Power Platform that perfect in between. It's like, what do you think? Do you agree with me? It's the best citizen development kind of game.
Well, the beauty is that a citizen developer, after 3 months, really is no longer a citizen developer, right? They're actually moving into the area of being a technologist.
Yes.
And then well on their way to, sitting in that spectrum from, what we would call low code to full on dev, and as you say, not everybody's cut out to be a developer. I've never been a developer. Although I have written code and understood code, I would never classify myself as a developer, nothing remote. But there's a lot of roles in between across those, a lot of supporting roles. There are things like being a change manager. There's been a project manager. There has been as you say, QA. There is much more now we're seeing a subject matter expert, somebody that knows their industry, building apps because it's so much like Lego that you can bring the blocks together and build something as long as you've got an idea. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to having the idea, right? And it's possible to build very rapidly applications, automations, bots, AI, etc.,
mobile
without having to write any code, right? So much more configuration based rather than coding based.
Yeah.
And so, if you can use Excel and you can use PowerPoint, there's no reason why. In fact, if someone wants to start, at the pre-Power Platform, I would say go and learn beginning, intermediate, and advanced levels of Excel. And there's tons of training on that. You would have enough information out of that to build and then start learning the Power Platform and develop some pretty mean apps on the Power Platform. Then, like if you go, you can get into, do you want to be analyze data, a data analyst, right? That affects Power, runs into Power BI, which most apps will have Power BI charting in it in some form, charts, to visualize data in a way that is humanly legible and makes sense to people. So there are so many paths. When I started, there was really only 2 paths. You could be what's called a functional consultant or a developer, and you would do all the things that were wrapped around that. Now, there's really around 10 to 15 different roles that you could take as part of a Power Platform team. One of the big new roles that is massively growing is that of where graphic designers develop the design of apps in something like a tool called Figma, and then allow you to import that Figma file directly into a Power App and then build your app, based on that. And so what we're seeing is that the whole design community is getting much more involved in the Power Platform than I've ever seen in my career. It used to be just the area of technologists, but now it's the area of designers as well.
And we need to mention for people who actually, maybe we solved the idea, okay, I need to learn more about Power Platform. So to wrap up this topic, I remember when you and I had discussed before this call, you mentioned the thing people usually miss on is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And if you can expand on that for people.
So if you were to learn one social media tool in our world, if you're not going to become a TikTok fan, TikTok creator or something like that, the one tool that you need to master, not be a dabbler, but master, is LinkedIn. And you need to make sure that your profile is par excellence. Like, you've got to really make sure it is amazing. And therefore, once again, there's heaps of YouTube clips, videos around how to make an awesome LinkedIn profile. You should be checking your LinkedIn. I go into LinkedIn 10 times a day, right? I'm in LinkedIn a lot because that's where that's where the customers are. That's where our customers are. That's where the job opportunities are in LinkedIn. That's where you can find out who else is doing this. How do they write their bio, their 2,500 words, I think you've got, might have increased actually. how you write that, you're right, and how you use every word to be meaningful and sell yourself, and your strap line across the top, the way you photo. It's one of the things I spent a whole session on the 90-day mentoring challenges on how to make sure everything from the difference between taking a photo with a smile and showing your teeth is quite different than a closed lip photo, and how it psychologically portrays you as either an open or a closed person, and so I go through all that kind of, but what I'm saying, because I'm actually not running the 90-day mentoring challenge anymore. I've put it on hold.
Unfortunately,
I ran it this year, as in I did it the first half of this year, but I'm not necessarily doing it next year at this point. But what I want to say is that go to YouTube. There's so many things. How do you create an awesome profile on LinkedIn? Get really good at it. Get recommendations. Showcase the apps you've built. Put them up there. Post. I used to always say, you need to have your own domain name, which I still say, right? You have your own website, own your own domain name, etc., and put your content up there. Make it's your home. It's where people can find you. But for every post you do on your blog, make sure that you're also posting it on LinkedIn as a post, because you will get far more traffic to your LinkedIn post than your personal post. Far more. And so it helps you build your credibility, your brand, your recognition. And what happens is that as you build that profile, you will have recruiters. They don't care where you are. They'll be reaching out to you and going, hey, can you do an interview? Can you look at this job? They will be hounding you. You will definitely have people after you to work for them.
That's the best probably advice you can have, because that's what people usually miss. And we have some friends who moved due to war to UK, and they actually ignored LinkedIn for far too long. They were thinking they need to go to job boards and everything. And I told you, if you're qualified, you want to have an agent talking to you. It's almost kind of in normal business, inbound versus outbound marketing. It's almost
totally. You want people chasing you, right? You want people headhunting you. And they'll only do that in a modern world if you have a good digital footprint. You need a good digital footprint. And you can't, I get so many people asking me for jobs, from around the world. And their first engagement is they connect with me and said, can you give me a job? I don't know who you are.
Exactly.
Like I always say, if you're looking at LinkedIn, think of LinkedIn as though you're going to an event. Someone's come up, they've shook your hand. The first thing you don't do, and when you shake their hand and say hello, you don't go, can you give me a job? Can you give me some money? You don't do that, right? In real life, people need to think of LinkedIn much more like real life. And they need to, what do? You have some small talk to start with, which, can be difficult, but, you build relationship. You don't just go into give me something, right?
Yeah.
So you build relationship. Look at this app I've created. Can you give me some feedback on it?
Exactly.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty amazing app. That's pretty cool. But you don't just go asking for something. And that's why I feel so many people do LinkedIn wrong, is that they think it's a place where you can go up and either sell your services, which is wrong. It's a place to build connection with people that might result in real world things happening positively for you. Exactly. But it won't happen on LinkedIn. You're not going to get a job offer on LinkedIn without any form of a phone conversation or a video call or something like that happening.
But people, first thing they will check on your LinkedIn. It's almost like they read your CV before you even reach out. And if
you look at my LinkedIn, it is my full CV is on LinkedIn. I don't have anything in my CV that is not on LinkedIn, because I want it to be totally clear what I specialize in, what I do, and that I show up in search results.
Yeah, and we're going to have your LinkedIn somewhere down below on the screen, just in case. So I learned a lot as usual. My relationship with Mark, it at least takes, it goes back at least a few years, maybe almost 5 years. Mark is definitely a person I recommend everyone who is engaged with Papa is the guy to follow. And I think it's super easy to find your Twitter account. It's NZ Guy.
Yeah, but just follow me on LinkedIn because I've even stopped. I've got quite a good following on Twitter, but my Twitter's not my. What I've really become clear, I've done every platform. I'm on TikTok. I'm on everything, but I only publish nowadays on LinkedIn. I only do stuff on LinkedIn because I realized at the end of the day, it is the number one business tool, and my audience that I'm after, they're not teenagers that want to talk about their hairstyles. It's what it is. It is business people I'm wanting to connect with. And so where are business people? They're on LinkedIn. That's it.
Yeah, hairstyle or shaving tools.
Yeah.
So let's say we sold an opportunity size, we sold on technology, how easy to get into that technology, how big demand is. So the last thing people will tell, okay, what about English? That's the final pushback. So what do you think about soft skill in English? How important to have it for, and which roles has less demand for English language?
Yeah, so it's a bonus, but we live in a global world, right? And in the number of people that can speak English are not the dominant, right? Spanish is as I think is the most dominant. Yes. Maybe some form of Mandarin, Chinese, etc. But let's separate out the Chinese market because there's enough Chinese people that address that market, right? We don't have to worry about necessarily working for a Chinese relate because there's enough people there, looking after that market. So, what I've noticed, so my friends and stuff that live in Spain, there's a massive growing community and there's 100% all in Spanish, right?
So if they speak Ukrainian, Russian, so probably you don't expect it will be a massive local demand for that service, but I'm sure it will grow as well. Because it
will grow in time, but yes, particularly in the current situation, not a massive demand that I know of. But I could.
People might argue, they cloud-based, so a war probably pushed people into cloud more. But still, when you're doing remote, so you work for an Australia company, and what kind of roles you would consider with people whose English is not best?
Look at the tools that you have, right? As in the modern world we live in. The translation tools are pretty amazing. Grammarly, guess where Grammarly came from? Ukraine,
exactly.
Yeah, they built that. That's an amazing tool to get that English grammar, etc. right. Yes, you want to be developing your English skills if you're wanting to address it won't hurt you, if you develop your English skills. But in saying that, there is still massive opportunity in other languages and to to other companies. So if you find if you find that it might be easier to learn Spanish, or as an example, or Portuguese, if you want to tackle the Brazil/Portuguese market, or Spanish gives you Mexico, Argentina, and Spain, as well as
French,
some other
French. I know. No?
Yeah, French, French is the historic language, but I'm not seeing many countries outside of France that,
I know Dynamics community in France is massive, actually. The guy who created XRM Toolbox, he's from France. I forgot what's his name.
Yeah, Tanguy.
Yeah. And you're right. So any language you studied at school, just polish up on that and try to use that opportunity. You don't need to speak English. That's a very valid point. Yeah, it's what I want to ask. So, before we go into Blitz, what kind of plans do you have? So, what do you plan for yourself for next year? So, I know your family expanding, and that's on plan.
A baby due in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I remember. Baby. Hopefully, I'll definitely reach out when it will be time because I know exactly the date. And that will be a surprise for those. I hope this video will not be published after your baby is born. I hope it will be sooner than that.
Yeah, before the 26th of this month. That's the key date.
Exactly, yeah. And I'll reach it. But what's your plan beyond family? Beyond building house, professional plan?
Well, the thing is that my property here, I've got I want to turn the entire property into what's called a food forest. So that's my pet project. That's what gives me joy. What else? I'm involved in building a large practice across Australia and New Zealand for the Power Platform for IBM, the employer. Whoops, there.
Yeah.
But after that, I'm
You're still big on social networks. I still see you publishing things on LinkedIn. I think conferences and events, they will start opening up. I see
Yeah.
some.
I've got no desire to go to conferences anymore.
That's another thing. It's just to see, they need to cancel all the, all these kind of sessions and just do a big happy hour, like happy day,
Yeah.
just for
Yeah.
people to connect. I think that will be the best event. But yeah.
Yeah. I've got no appetite. So like I get asked, and it's got asked again this week to speak at an event, and I go, no, I don't speak at any events anymore. I'm just not interested.
Mhm.
My focus is going to be in New Zealand, on the New Zealand market, because after being traveling and away for 10 years, I realized that my global connections are much stronger than my local connections. So I need to build relationship again locally. In New Zealand, that's with Microsoft and local. I don't know. As in, let's see how we go at IBM. I think I've got golden handcuffs on me till the 20th of July next year, and then after that, the golden handcuffs are off. And I didn't think I'd ever go back and work for a partner when I was in the UK, but this is how it's interesting. Things change.
IBM is not just a partner. IBM is they say every course I do, they say in B2B game, no one was fired for hiring IBM. And this saying is very famous, and there is a point in it.
But I think my next step career-wise, I might go and work full-time for Microsoft.
Okay.
We'll see. If the right job came up, I think I would do that. Or I might actually totally change careers and go and work for Google.
Oh, really? So in this case, I think we need to cut out what you just said. It goes against everything we just mentioned. No, stay with Power Platform. I think, Mark, you bring a lot of light, a lot of wisdom. And what I need to say, the thing about Mark, and maybe I remember I went to a session. I think it was in Scotland, and so every session was packed with technical materials, and it felt quite usual. And I went to your session. I don't remember the topic. That's the thing. I don't remember, but I remember
how to be a consultant. How to be a consultant.
Was it how to be? But I remember how fresh delivery was. So I felt I'm in the middle of TED session, TED speech, and that's how Mark is very. And I'm happy to say it in your face. You're very innovative. You're cutting edge, and losing. So if Power Platform will lose you, at least New Zealand, Australia will lose a lot of kind of wisdom. So Blitz, quick questions.
Yeah, quick questions.
Quick questions. Answers can be quick, but you can expand. So first, podcasts or blogs?
Podcasts.
Perfect. You want to explain why?
Because I've had a podcast for 5 years now in business applications. Yeah. It's what I do. So I tend to publish 2 episodes a week, and that's where I'm focused. Yeah.
Perfect. So you did a lot of coaching. So coaching or self-learning?
It's kind of like both. You need somebody often you need somebody can help you shortcut so many of the problems they made. So I always say coaching is like standing on the shoulders of giants. Someone's done a whole bunch of work. You don't have to do that. You can just learn what they learned and then take that next step, rather than going through everything they learned to get to the same level as them. You can step on their experience and grow to the next level.
So do you need to have a coach, or it's not is it required?
It's not required in that I'm also a big fan of self-learning. When I was in London, I did 1 year where I read, 80 books or something in 1 year, business books. And I get a lot, as in personally, it's just my way I learn. I actually learn a lot from self-paced training, where I set so I can speed through bits that are not applicable to me because I know me, rather than having to linear follow everything. So I'm a big believer in self-paced learning.
So traveling fun or college life fun? What do you think?
Traveling, without a doubt.
Yeah. And,
I'm already about in the next couple of, once my baby's born, I'll book my tickets to go to Italy and Greece for a month. Yeah.
So you're not coming to UK? You've done with UK? No.
I was going to come on my way through, but then the flights were easier to go direct from Singapore up to
Yeah,
I don't know where, close by. In fact, I think I can go right into Italy from Singapore. So,
and we're recording this on August 3rd. And if you check British newspapers, you don't want to fly into UK. I mean, in terms of all the collapsing Heathrow Airport, you don't want to be
right?
Here. Yeah. So, do you need to have an MVP status?
No, but I say no, you definitely don't. But and I'm quoting here another MVP from Canada, if your career is going to be in Microsoft business applications, it will be one thing that allows you to accelerate your growth in your career if you became an MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Now, equally, I would say with that is that if not higher, become a fast track recognized solution architect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is worth gold on your CV, more than an MVP.
More than an MVP, interesting.
Yep.
That's definitely a lesson for everyone, including me. So TikTok or YouTube?
TikTok.
Wow.
If I look at how much time I spend on one or the other, right now it would be TikTok. But then again, that's a hard one for me because once again, in all the stuff I am learning, if I look, whenever I'm building or something physically around the property, I always go to YouTube first and find out, like, I just got a dehydrator, right? Because I've got a whole bunch of chilies that I've grown on my garden.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go and just chuck the chilies in the dehydrator. First thing I do, go to YouTube, best way to dehydrate chilies. Find out from the people that have done it heaps and heaps of time. Then I go and do it. So I use YouTube massively for learning.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just want to take a break from life, I go to TikTok.
Okay, what would you tell your younger self?
What would I tell my younger self? I would tell my younger self to learn a lot more about design in how it affects app creation. So design, art, all
UX.
that type of stuff. I would spend a lot more time in that area.
That's a fun question. Managed or unmanaged?
Managed.
You're positive. No question, no doubt.
Yeah.
You've been sold and managed. Perfect. So it's
I've
almost
been sold. I've had a career. As in, I've read the data. As in, I've used it. I know how it works. So it's not a who's got the loudest voice, therefore they must be right situation.
Right. So it's almost the last question. Where do you think Power Platform will be in 5 years?
I think the Power Platform will be as ubiquitous as Excel and Access, as in it will be, I read a book on the future around, as a famous guy, is actually located in the UK. One of his books was Sapiens, and there's two others in it. And one of the books was, he talked about there's going to be a couple of platforms that are going to really run the business world. And I really see the Power Platform as being one of those platforms, just based on Microsoft's reach and how ubiquitous Windows became. I think the Power Platform will be the business tool to create anything, and it will get way more advanced. AI, and when I talk about AI, I'm talking about the ability to create apps using AI.
Perfect.
In other words, you're just given instruction. I need to be able to do blah, 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 blah. It'll apply all the best practice and build out the app.
Don't you think Teams will become an interface for every single Power Platform app? App?
At the moment, absolutely. And it'll be one of the interfaces because, although I use Teams a lot, when I'm on a mobile device, I don't want to go into an app via Teams. I want to have the app available to me direct. And still, even though I've got a massive computer set up here, I still spend more time on my mobile phone than I do on my computer to do business work.
Yeah, perfect. So you know what? I still have questions prepared for you. I think like another 10, but I'll leave it for another session. It was perfect. I really appreciate it.
Excellent.
I think we had a lot of insights, and I definitely encourage people to reach out, ask Mark for for his advice, wisdom. Yeah, obviously you can reach out to me and I can put you in touch if you have anything to talk, if you're close to Australia and you're looking for opportunities. The final question I want to ask, and I'm trying to ask everyone, what we're not talking about, we need to talk about in Power Platform.
What we're not talking about, or that we need to talk about, UX.
Okay.
UX, and also separately to UX, UI. We need to spend a lot more time on understanding that question. And then the other thing I don't think we're talking about enough is fusion teams.
True. Yeah, perfect. So this perfect finish, and I really appreciate. We should say bye. So you'll have all the So you mentioned LinkedIn is the best place to get in touch.
Number
with you,
one
right?
place.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, linkedin.com/in/NZ365 guy.
Yeah, we'll have it down below. So if you have questions, if you have comments, just leave it down below. Leave all your likes, and thank you, Mark, a lot for your interview. It will be translated in a couple of languages, so you'll hear yourself how your voice sounds in different language.
I love it.
Really, yeah. So we can.
Thanks, Vlad.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.